Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our presentation titled Library Can't Buy You All the Data. Our research focus is really on what data sources are our business researchers citing. So my name is Edward. I'm the Business and Entrepreneurship Librarian at University of Connecticut or UConn. And my co-presenter here, Jiepe, is the Financial and Economic Data Analysis Librarian at New York University or NYU. Where we are from actually impacts our research scope, which we'll come to in a minute. But I wanted to share our agenda with you today. We just want to cover a couple of items here. The premise of our research, how we came about it, the three types of secondary data sets, what were the top data sets in our findings by type, by source, right, and geographic coverage. Then Jiepe will bring us through the second part of the presentation and talk about machine learning topic modeling techniques and go through some of the analysis that we did in our research. And we will come back again for any questions that you may have, any kind of discussion points that you might be interested in. So this is really some of the research questions that we had in mind when we started our project. We wanted to know exactly what were the data citations that our researchers in the School of Business were citing in their papers. We wanted to know whether they were conducting their own primary research or were they relying on secondary data sets. And we use Alice Kalinowski and Todd Hines' paper um, to kind of tease out whether they were commercial, proprietary, or public and open data sets. And we kind of see this as a little form of assessment. You know, they were citing that particular data. It means that they have access to the data either through collaborators or through their own research funds or their own, network. And JFA will cover a little bit more about what were the emerging topics as well and how they kind of relate to the data sets that were being cited. And I want to start off by sort of scoping our research. We conveniently used Scopus to pull out journal articles, right, from the years 2020 to 2022. So it's a very short span of time. And most of us can recall that 2020 was the start of the pandemic. And in our presentation, we will kind of rely on saying NYU to actually refer to the Stern School of Business at NYU, and we would say UConn whenever we are referring to just the School of Business. So we looked at you know papers that were authored by um, researchers that are affiliated to these two schools, and we had about close to 600 articles, and you can see that the lion's share here is really coming from NYU 471 articles and 125 articles from UConn. So I just want to give you a sense of the universe and what we are working with. If you look at Lauren Redner's sample, she looked at the Big Ten Alliance 2014 to 2019 across 191 journal titles. And the sample size that she worked with was 362 articles. So we are working with a larger sample size here, or a larger universe, so to speak. Um, and this was kind of like the process that we went through. We looked at whether the particular paper was database. So what do we mean by database? We basically look at whether they were using, reusing, analyzing research data, whether there were any kind of empirical methods. And you can see, we sort of ruled out papers that were not database if they were review articles, they were systematic reviews, there were simulations, experiments. We did come across quite a fair amount of them. And then if yes, there were database, we would then figure out whether it contained original research or secondary research. So original research is what most of us understand as primary research, collecting their own data through surveys, interviews, fieldwork, and our focus really is on secondary data. And some of the papers, a small amount, had both original and secondary data, right? And then from the secondary data, we looked at creating a record for every single data set that was cited, right? Usually there's more than one per paper. We categorize them, each data set that was cited, into the three types that I mentioned earlier, and then I'll cover a little bit in my coming slides. And we gave them a name, we tried to standardize their names, we gave them a vendor or whoever was responsible for creating that data set that was standardized as well. We gave them one content tag, one data type, one geography to try to understand what kind of data it was about. And then, of course, we had a note section, which was really web addresses that we captured. And this is how our spreadsheet looked like. I know it's kind of small, but you can see that for every single article, we expanded them based on how many data sets were cited. And the different columns you see here are what I talked about earlier. And I just want to give you a sense on the numbers, right? You can see that out of 592 records, those are the journal articles. The majority, about 66, 67%, were database. And then we kind of moved them to the next round, which we found out that, again, the majority, 70 over percent, were or had cited, some kind of secondary data. And then when we expanded them, we arrived at around close to 1,000 data sets that were being cited, right? And you can see the breakdown. We had half of them, 50%, that were public and open, 40% that was commercial data sets, and then you have 10% that are proprietary. And we can spend a little bit more time talking about this in my coming slide, but I just want to give you a sense, like an overview. This was how the breakdown was. Again, because many of the articles were authored by folks over at NYU Stern, you can see that the lion's share of the data set count came from there. And you can see that there aren't many, not very strong differences, I would think, in terms of how many data sets were cited from each paper on the average. So 3 versus 2.5. Okay. And I know I've been using commercial, proprietary, and public and open many times earlier in my presentation. And I just want to give you a sense how we are defining them. We follow, again, the definitions that are explained in Kalinowski's and Hines 2020 paper. And, to give a very quick description, when we say commercial, we mean something that can be bought off the shelf, something that usually they have a representative and they are ready to do the sales with, whether it's commercially, with corporate clients or with academic clients, right? So something that's available for sale. And I think the best examples we can use here would be CRIS, CRSP, as well as CompuStat. And then some of the other examples we came across that I thought was interesting enough to mention about was Keeper. Keeper is a sort of Amazon price tracker. And then there's another company, Fatius. They were formerly known as ARM Insight. They're headquartered in Oregon and they have an office in New York. A close competitor is actually Earnest Research. So they look at debit and credit card data, transactions, and stuff like that. And then you have proprietary data. That's a photo of my son playing with his phone while seated in the supermarket cart. The idea that is kind of messy, kind of protected, right? And these are real examples that we obtained from the papers. One was citing a frequent shopper program for a large independent grocery store, and the other one was restaurant reviews from an Asian review website. Um, that's for proprietary data. And then the last one would be public and open type of data. And we have many examples. I just want to share some. Most of us are familiar with the American Community Survey from Census Bureau. Um, there's also um, Facebook, Social Connectedness Index, what the company has tagged data for good at Meta. Movie Lens is a it's an interesting example because it's a non-commercial personalized movie recommendations. The group that's behind Movie Lens is called Group Lens, and they're actually a research lab over at the University of Minnesota. And then the last one I have here is from the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission. I think most of us are familiar with the yellow taxis in New York City and the medallion taxis, but actually the trip record data includes app-based companies such as Uber and Lyft. So there's really interesting data there for researchers to look at. So this is really the exciting part of our research, right? The findings. After going through close to 1,000 cited data, these were some of the top commercial data that was seen. And you can see that CompuStat and the Chris US stock comes at the very top, which is not surprising. I call them the runaway leaders. In another paper that you will see at the end of our slides, by Berninger et al. It's still a work in progress paper. The last version was in 2022. They labeled Chris and CompuStat as the royal couple because it always comes kind of together. People tend to cite both of them together, right? And then you have some of the popular names among business researchers: SDC, IBIS, DataStream, Bloomberg, DewScan, Bodex, CSMA, which is the Chinese equivalent to CompuStat or to CRIS, and Win Financial Terminal, which is again the Chinese equivalent to the Bloomberg Terminal, I would think. So this is just another look, breaking down based on the schools. You would see that there's no big change in terms of ranking. The only thing that I would take note, being the business librarian at UConn, is we don't subscribe to DuScan, so that shows up as a zero. But that's apparently pretty popular over and used by the researchers at NYU Stern. And I want to give everybody kind of a sense. Um, Based on vendors, right? What were the top vendors? Again, you can see the three runaway leaders in this ranking is S&P Global, Refinitiv, which is now an LSEC company, and Center for Research in Security Prices, that's CRIFS. And I just want to pause here and think about some of the implications for people in the room who are in the acquisition, right? Is your library or business school funding these data sets and working with these vendors, right? I think the other vendor names that appear, with 12 mentions and below, like Bloomberg, most of us are familiar with Bureau van Dijk, which is, you know, a few years ago, has been bought over by Moody Analytics. MSCI, Win Information is the company that's behind the Win Financial Terminal, Dow Jones, and MSCI. So moving on to the second type that we want to talk about, we won't talk about proprietary data, but we will definitely want to spend time talking about public and open data. If I recall my numbers correctly, 50% um, of close to 1,000 data sets cited were public and open data. And you can see that the big difference with the commercial type of data is that there's no runaway leaders. The highest cited count is only at 13 and 11. And most of us would be familiar with EDGAR, which stands for Electronic Data Gathering, Analysis, and Retrieval System. That's the primary system that's used by companies and others. They're submitting documents under the Securities Act. That's where all the filings are. So you see there's a good mix of state, government, supranational kind of organizations like World Bank, who is responsible for the World Development Indicators. And you also see commercial organizations on this list, like Facebook SCI is by Meta, a commercial entity, but they've you know chosen to give away or to allow that their data sets to be freely available. There are also individuals in the sense of researchers, like the Farmer French is actually hosted on a professor's Kenneth French website. I think he's at Dartmouth right now. So that institution's kind of hosting the data sets that he puts up. And then you have other stuff here. So there's a lot to unpack here. I just want to give everybody kind of sense what we are talking about. I mentioned about Kenneth French. He calls it his data library. It's just a website where he's putting up the data sets that many researchers are citing. It's an interesting example, speaking to an audience of librarians. I want to talk a little bit about data stewardship, right? I think most of us are aware that link rot is a very real, um, happens probably more often than we would like it to. Links break all the time. So what are we doing to safeguard against link rot, right? What happens when researchers move, they're no longer at the institution? Are we, getting the Internet Archive or another entity like maybe Zenodo to kind of host a duplicate copy of the website, especially the data sets, right? Because researchers might want to come back to it, right? And we did come across a couple of examples when we were looking through where you had researchers citing data sets that were no longer available, right? Because the link doesn't work anymore. Or we had a really tough time trying to trace back and retrieve the original data set that was being cited. Okay, so you can see here the U.S. Census Bureau is number one, right, with 40 mentions, way more than all the other entities. I think in large because so much of the data products it comes up with are being used by our researchers. So that's why it comes at the top. But there are many different interesting examples here. For example, those coming from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. I think these are really interesting ones to look at and often cited as well. So this slide is really just putting together what we talked about earlier, basically lumping the public and open data sets as well as the commercial type together. And you'll see that the top is still CompuStat and CRISP because they just get cited a lot in business research, at least based on our universe last 2 years, 2020 to 2022, right? And these are some of the common names that were mentioned, more than five mentions. So definitely this is something that we maybe want to take a closer look at because these are really, I wouldn't call them the core because that's not representative of business research as a whole, but definitely worth investigating further. I'll give a really interesting example for myself. I learned that the core reports, longer name is the Reports of Condition and Income. They are actually from the FFIEC, the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. And the historical data is actually housed at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago website. And similarly, there's the National Information Center, NIC. It's also a repository of financial data collected by the Federal Reserve System. And one of the cited data set that's within their website is actually the FRY9C, and that looks at all domestic holding companies on a consolidated basis and is collected every quarter. This is the same look based on vendors or organizations that are responsible for the data. And you can see again, the top three are commercial type, right? S&P Global, Refinitiv, CRIS, and then the fourth and the fifth one, the sixth one, all the rest that comes in actually are mostly I would label them as like government, right? Or some kind of national level, or in the case of World Bank, supranational entity that produces all these data sets. And I just want to go a little bit because we did break down every cited data set into what kind of geographic coverage it has, and you can see the lion's share, half of them are either, half of them are actually focusing on the US, and then you have another, 36% that's sort of global in nature. Some of them you will see in my next slide would be data sets from SDC, IBIS, DataStream, Bloomberg. We kind of classify them all under global. Um, but I think what's also interesting is looking at some of the more regional kind of focus research. Some of the research papers are using data sets from Europe and EU. UK is not included. There's also a fair share that's coming in from China and India, right? And I just want to explain North America here a little bit. Um, that is inclusive of a lot of data sets that's coming from that's on Canada, but we kind of put a separate column for North America because we had data sets that cover Mexico, right? But we also had data sets that cover both the US and Canada. So that's why we kind of lumped them or kind of tagged them under North America. There was another data set that was a data set of images of birds in North America. We had a proprietary data set that was focusing on a North American specialty e-retailer. So that's why we had to create that category. Okay, and this is a very quick look again on where is the data sort of tagged in terms of geographic coverage. You can see that the top USA, it's really CompuStat, Chris, Edgar, Fred, American Community Survey. These are the popular ones.
Thank you, Edward, for providing an introduction and talking through the descriptive statistics and also a few other important aspects, such as how we identify and categorize or exploring the data. We find two things caught our attention. So we decide to go a little bit deeper and run extra inferential analysis to see what they might reveal. So in particular, the first thing that popped up was we find the researchers from the two business schools seem to have a different usage pattern regarding the data types. Looking at the slide, maybe the raw number might not make this immediately clear, but because of the uneven number of publications in our sample data. However, if we look at the percentage, the different usage pattern between two schools become more clear. As you can see at NYU, commercial data set make up about 36 out of the total use, while public or open data is a large share, takes about 54 of the total. But on the flip side, you can show a different pattern. Over 57 of the researchers used the commercial data in their publication, while public data set constituted about 35 out of the total. So we are definitely seeing a quite contrast in data types adopted in the publications between the two schools. As a result, we did a chi-square test of independence to examine the relationship between the school and the type of secondary data sets used in our sample data. So our non-hypothesis is there's no association between the school, which are NYU and the UConn, and the type of secondary data set used, specifically commercial data and public or open data. In other words, our null hypothesis assumes that the distribution of the type of data sets is the same for both NYU and UConn, and any observed differences in the distribution is due to random chances. And our test yield a chi-square stats of 28.58 with a p-value significantly less than the conventional threshold of zero point zero 0.05. Therefore, we have strong evidence to reject our non-hypothesis and conclude each school has a different distribution of these two types of data sets used. And in addition to the most frequently used commercial and the public data set by researchers, as we just discussed, we have also identified the presence of a long tail effect in our sample data, wherein NYU has over 400 out of total 738 has only one occurrence, and at UConn, there are 92 out of 190 has only one occurrence. When we are plotting this long tail effect because of the uneven sample size between the two schools, we plot the normalized histogram instead of the actual frequency. So as you can see, both schools demonstrate a strong long tail effect in our plot. But if you look closer at the chart, you will see the probability density score is different. UConn has a higher probability density score, which we will discuss in the next slide. Next, we created a percentile table for the dataset frequency of both schools. As you can see, the distribution of two schools, they both have a median about 50 percentile frequency of 1. This means that there at least half of the dataset appear only once, means only used by only appear in one publication, which is the case for both schools. And for higher percentile, for example, the 80s or above, UConn's distribution show higher frequencies, which suggests a more substantial long tail effect as compared to NYU's distribution. In the exploration of topic clustering, we utilize LDA on the text of the abstract of the publication in our collection. LDA stands for the latent Dirichlet allocation, which is a statistical model that is used to discover topics within a collection of documents. It is a form of unsupervised learning, which means we do not have a pre-labeled data, but we just run across a specified range of topic numbers to ascertain the optimal count of topics that align best with our corpus. By examining the plots, we can select the number of topics that balance best between complexity, which means have enough topics to describe our data well, with generalizability, not so many topics that the model is overfitting the noise in the data. So as you can see, number 10 is the best fit for our abstract data. Once the number of topics is decided, we rerun the LDA with the number of topics equals to 10, and we obtained a list of terms with the highest weight under each topic according to the calculation of the statistical model. For example, like topic 2, the terms bank, service, study, disorder, market seem to be the cluster of the articles representing the with a focus of banking system. So we simply just review the terms of each topic one by one and give each topic a name or give it a label for our data exploration. So by reviewing the terms under each topic, we create a long label for each topic based on our understanding of the topics in business and finance. For example, bank service and market disorder, we will say this is the topic include the study of bank services or bank service quality and its effect on market disorder, or the role of bank services in mitigating market disorder, or the market disorder and the bank services performance, a case study using dynamic model. And next, we also create a list of shorter version of our topic list for the conveniences for create data visualization. And we ran the models through each of the document in our collection to obtain the topic weight of each article calculated by the model. Like for example, for the article, the first line is the Scopus ID of that article, and the figures under it are is the topic weight of this article calculated by the model. As you can see, the fourth one, which is the a longitudinal study on investor, has the highest weight, which is the dominant topic. So we will assign topic 4 to this article. Then after completing running through the model for all the articles, every article will be assigned a dominant topic, and we combine those dominant topic information with all the existing variables to do the visualization to see if any of key data sets can be identified within certain topic. So as you can see, we first did exploration of between the data name and our topic. So the data include commercial, public, and proprietary. So as you can see, because of the extremely long list of the unique occurrence of data sets in our sample data, we only colored a few data sets with the occurrence more than 2 times in under each topic. A lot of them, they do make sense to appear in that topic. For example, for the loan market, the deal scan, CompuStat, and crisp US stock appear more than other data sets. But some of other secondary data sets does not have the like very strong relationship, but probably the reason it appears in our visualization is just because our researchers use that data set for the purpose of their research. For example, for the investor data, the third topic, there has Facebook Social Connectedness Index, SCI, which is kind of like social media data, not necessary to be in that topic, but that was just happened to be used by the researchers for that topic. We also find among all the data, CompuStat appear in 9 topics out of 10, which turn out to be the most versatile data set for different purposes. And the next is the crisp US stock in our topic clusters. And next, we also compare the type of the data with our topic cluster. So as you can see, the distribution is similar because we have about, if you remember, we have the commercial and the public open data take about from 30 to 50% ish in 2 schools. So as you can see from the chart, the distribution by topic looks similar, which means for each topic, the like half of the researchers use the public, almost half of the researchers use commercial. So there's no dominant data type is used for any topic. So the last exploration we did is between the topics and the geographic coverage. So as you can see, we break the geo coverage under each topic You may remember that in our geographic coverage descriptive stats, the focus of US data takes about 50%, and the next is global, takes about 36% out of the total sample data. And when it is break down into each topic, it has a similar percentage distribution as well. Maybe there's one or two kind of exception, which is the social value. The second one, global and the US has the similar weight, and also for the bank services, the last one has used more global data than the US. But still, we are just comparing the results collected from two schools. For now, what we are saying is the geographic distribution under different topics from the research from these two schools. It is not necessarily the trend of the research in this area, but we just want to showcase exploration possibility of discovering the topics of the study as a more innovative way to combining with a few of the traditional fields we used to look at when we were evaluating the data sets.
So this concludes the end of our presentation. I want to thank you for paying attention and thinking about what we've been thinking about. And we would love to continue the conversation. Like I always say in my presentations, I don't have all the answers. This is really a conversation that we started among two of us, and we would love to include you to hear your thoughts about what you thought about the research that we did. And here I just want to very quickly, you know, acknowledge as well as provide some of the links to some of the papers that we talked about, so that you can, go find out more about it. Thank you.